Recurring tasks in Notion have long been a tough challenge. But thanks to one of the latest updates, we can finally create proper recurring tasks only in Notion. Repeat at any frequency? Check. Repeat only after completion? Check. Keep historic records of old tasks? Check, check, and check. So let's dive in and learn everything there is to know about how you can set up the perfect recurring tasks in Notion. First up, basic recurring tasks. What we want to happen with these simple recurring tasks is that whenever we set the status of any task to done, we want Notion to automatically push out the due date by whatever frequency we have and then set it back to not started. So let's see how we can create this. In this simple setup, what we have is our task database, of course, with the name property, a status property, although you could also just use a checkbox to indicate whether it's done or not, the due date, and then the frequency. Actually, two properties for frequency, and I'll show you both methods. One where we have, just like one of these dropdowns, where we say weekly, monthly, daily, and one where we can be a bit more specific and actually put in a number. We have both of them have advantages, so we'll go over both of them. That's the basic setup, what you need for this to work. In order to set this up now, we need to create a database automation. Notion just reworked them, so that's amazing. So we can click on the flash icon here. This gets up the new builder, and we can first name this. So this will be, simple recurring tasks. Now first, we need to decide when should this automation trigger, when should it happen. We already talked about that, right? We need it to trigger whenever we set a status of a task to complete. So we're going to select our status property and then say when this is complete. And a second condition, right? Not for all tasks that are complete, but only for the ones that actually have something selected in recurring. So as a secondary option, we add here that the frequency is set to any option, right? Whenever any of these things are applied, those things together should be true. And we need to make sure this is set to when all apply. This means it only happens, when both of these things are true at the same time. All right, so that's the trigger. Now in terms of the action, what should happen when it runs? Well, the first thing that we want to do is we need to make sure that we push out the time by whatever variable we have set. So what we want it to do is we want to say edit property and please edit the due date. So let's click on that. And then here we want to choose the custom formula option in order to write now a formula that will dynamically push the date forward. So let's select it. And then in here we can write our formula. And what we first need to do is we first need to grab, of course, the current due date. So in order to do that, we will opt the page that triggered the automation and then type dot and say, okay, we want to grab that due date. And now we want to add a date to it. So in order to just make this a bit easier to read, I'm going to press Shift Enter to get in the next line, but you can also just write it in one long line. And then we'll write dot date add. And date add allows us now to increase our current date by something else. What we need to input there is first by how much we want to input it, and then the type, right? So if you put in 7 as how much it should advance it, and we need to also put in days as a secondary option for it to know that we want to advance it by days. All right, so next step, we need to dynamically figure out how long it should, push it out. So again, just going the next line to make this a bit easier to read. And then I'm going to use an ifs statement. And ifs allows us to pick, go now through several conditions, say, okay, if, our frequency is 1, please, increase it by this, and so on and so on, because we need, of course, to translate weekly, monthly, and daily to actual numbers. So again, new line. And now I'm going to say, if the value of the page that triggered this, if the frequency for it was in quotation marks weekly, then please give me 7. All right, so that's our first thing. Then we're going to in there again and say page that triggered automation dot frequency equals quarterly. Then please monthly. I think we have monthly. Then please push it forward by 30. And if we have page that triggered automation dot frequency was daily, then please push it forward by 1. Then we can close the bracket for our if statement, and then have again a comma, and after that comma, just like now indicate how far it should be pushed out, and that's days. So that's the whole formula. And this can seem a bit intimidating if you've never written a formula before, but trust me, once you go through this just slow and step by step with help of this video, or with a blog post in the description where we have all of these also for you to copy paste, then this will become second nature very soon. All right, so let's click on save. And then that's the first step. So this is how we set the due date to the next value. And then of course, we also need to reset the status. So the next thing that we want to do is we want to make sure that the status is set again to not started. All right, now let's click on create and test the whole thing. All right, so weekly sprint meeting, currently not started, October 2nd. I'm going to push this to done, and then we're going to wait a second, and hopefully it updates now the due date to October 9th. Yes, there it is, and again, it goes back to not started. Let's do the OKR update as well. This one should be pushed out by 30 days, and then bring out the trash should be updated to next date. And these automations, they always have a second of a delay, right? So it will take a moment for it to update, but now we're November 1st here and October 3rd. Perfect. So this base version works. Now, a few important things to keep in mind with this method. First, the formula is case sensitive. So what we have in here, where we say, okay, our recurring task, and then for my value, this needs to match exactly what you have in your labels. And if you change your labels, you need to adjust it in here as well. So it won't dynamically update. Also, if you change something, so if I change now every month, right, to monthly to every month, you see something else is happening. If I now just put it to done, nothing will happen. Not only won't it advance this, but it also will not set this back to not started. Because in our automation, we picked initially all options, but you see it shows this now as a deleted option. It didn't understand right now that we just renamed it. So that's a limitation right now with this workaround. Maybe they also update this for future behavior, but right now it means that whenever you make any changes to the available ones, you want to go in here and just make sure that you update your trigger to again include any options and that you are case sensitive with the values. All right, so let's put this back to not started before we mess everything up. Second, of course, like the, advancing something for monthly by like 30 days or by 31 days is sometimes not the most precise, right? So if you need to have more advanced uses, like, doing it on every first Monday of the month, like these sort of situations, you either need to write a lot more complicated Notion formula or then use the help of some other no-code or low-code tools. But again, this should get you, for like most use cases, already there. Now, if you want more control over everything and you don't want the labels, but instead be able to put in individual numbers, we can do that as well. So let's just modify this, and let's just say, okay, this should be 4, this should be 40, and this should be 21. In that case, what we want to do is we want to modify our automation to say that, okay, whenever we set the due date, we don't need to, for the date add, we simply need to now pick the value of that. So we can remove the whole date ifs part, and we can simply say, please, whenever you need to add something here, take page the triggered automation dot the repeat every value. Much shorter formula, right? Save it, and now when we put this to done, it should advance the whole thing by 21 days. But again, then of course you need to put in the individual values for every repeat rather than having these nice drop-down selections. Now a quick word here on availability. As you saw, setting up these recurring tasks requires using database automations. If you're on the free plan, you can't create any database automations yourself. But you can use database automations that were part of a template that you downloaded. So to make sure that you can use these recurring tasks no matter what plan you're on, I created a simple template that has all of these use cases with all of the different setups in them. You can simply download it with the link in the description and then integrate it into existing workflows, and that way you have access to everything even on the free plan. Oh, and there is also a method of how you can create a simpler version of recurring tasks without database automation. It's the last one I share in this video, so make sure you stick around until that one. Now let's take a look at dynamic recurring tasks. In this scenario, we don't just want to push out the due date. We want to reschedule the task for like a certain frequency out based on when we complete it. Now again, this is super simple with the new database automations, and we can use what we have already built so far. So let's take our setup here where we currently advance it by our repeat every value. All we need to do to modify it and to say like instead take the actual completion date is we need to change this first line page that triggered the automation. So instead of taking the due date from the page that triggered the automation, we can remove both these elements, and we want to put in the date triggered. Again, rest of it stays the same. So whatever date add modules you have below, whether that's the repeat one or the if statement, can stay the same. And now we do it based off when this task actually was completed. So again, same setup for the rest, click on save. And now, even though this is, like currently it's on the due date is November 1st, if I put it now to not started, and I put this just to 1, it will put it to, ideally, let's see what date is today, October 2nd is today, so it should put it to October 3rd, and just like increasing the frequency by this one element. All right, October 3rd, there it is, perfect. At this point, just quickly about an error that you might encounter while building this flow out. And that is that currently your automation assumes and expects a due date set. So for whatever reason, you don't actually have a due date in here, right? So you said, yes, please have this automation. I have it set to every month, but no due date was set. And we actually trigger based off that, right? So let's go back to the due date instead of the completion date. So let's go back to page that triggered dot due date. If this is the situation and we now have something without it and we put it on done, then the automation won't run and it will throw an error. Error handling is not too robust, unfortunately, at this point in the Notion automation. So what you kind of have to do is you need to go in here and then you will see this has been paused. So even for the other ones that should run correctly, it will currently not run. Which means when you set this flow up for other people and not just for yourself, you need to make sure that they are either aware that they should put in due dates all the time, or you can put in a fallback. And a fallback means that if this if empty, then please take another value. And this is how you would do it. We want to go to our automation and on the simple recurring task. And then here, where that's to set due date to my value, we need to make sure that we have a fallback option here. So we can do that by first by wrapping this whole thing in an if statement. So we can say if, and then we can say empty. So if the page that triggered the automation, the due date of that, if that is empty, then please give me, and now you can just give me the date that this was triggered, and then if otherwise, give me the page that triggered this and the due date. And then we can close the bracket, oops. And that way we have now built a fallback which says, okay, if you have a due date, please take that and advance it. If not, take the time at which this automation was triggered. And you just avoid that you run into a situation where your automation gets paused, maybe for a whole organization and no one quite realizes it. That would be not the best situation to be in, of course. But what if you want to keep the historic data trail of all the tasks that you finished in the past and want to create a new instance of the task at a certain, future date? Well, no problem. There are two ways to achieve this. One way where we create an exact mirror of our task, another one where we apply a standard template. And I'm going to walk you through both of them. So first, mirror. In order to do this, we want to create a new automation. Let's call this, create mirror of task. Our trigger will be the same as before. So the status should be set to complete. And the second condition is that a frequency is set. Same idea as before. But now for the do action, we will say that we want to add a page to. And we want to add a page to our same database, so where our tasks live in. And now we can start mapping properties over. And this is amazing. This is a huge, huge unlock with the recently revamped Notion database automations that previously wasn't possible. What we can do now, instead of hard coding a value in, we can go on insert a formula and we can say, please give me the name from the page that triggered the automation. So we say page triggered automation and name, and then save. And now we repeat this for every single property that we want to map over. So in terms of the due date, we want to, again, insert custom formula. And here what we want to do, right, is we want to pick the date of that property. So let's go again, page that triggered the automation, give me the due date of that, and then date add, give me, let's do it simple this time, so page that triggered it, and the repeat every, right? And then give me that in oops, we need to have here a comma, and then days. This is the same formula as before, just written on one line rather than on several lines. So you can use this exact same methods that we previously had. You can also vary it, right? To instead look up the frequency that we mapped and then, take the value from that. So same idea as before. Click on save. Now add the next property. Let's map the frequency over as well. Custom formula. Let's say page that triggered it dot frequency, even though we don't even use it in this case. And then last but not least, we need, of course, repeat every. So again, custom formula, give me page that triggered dot repeat every. And you would do this for every single property that you map over, right? If there's a responsible person, you can do that. If it's linked to a project, you could do that. And that way create an exact mirror of it. So let's click on create and let's see what happens. So here we have prepare weekly sprint meeting, view 2nd October, repeat every 7. So let's move this to done. What should happen now is this should stay the same, right? Nothing should happen to this, but we should get a new entry for, prepare weekly sprint meeting. Perfect. Not started October 9th. All the properties have been mapped over. Absolutely amazing. Only drawback with this method, if someone messed something up, for example, they for whatever reason, they typed something in here and it's just prepare weekly sprint instead of weekly sprint meeting. The next clone that I create of this will again have exactly these values. So you kind of play a game of silent post if you work with a large team and they might change things. So the second method is about triggering something based off a specific template. In order to do so, you want to first create a new database template. So you want to say, okay, weekly sprint meeting. And then we want to fill out the properties that we need, right? So this is like a repeat every 7 for the due date when we don't need to set anything. But we probably want to have another property, which is called, which is select, called type. Now we don't need that, but it's like makes it sure that we you know, like based on what we can ensure that it always applies the right thing. So let's call this weekly sprint meeting. All right, perfect. And now what we want to do, or what we have to do, is we create a separate automation. Let's pause this one. And this automation needs to be set up individually for every type of recurring task. So it is less scalable than this one, right? Which just like copies the task over, you know, in general. This one you would need to create separate instances per type, but still can be well worth it if you work in a team environment. All right, so let's go in and let's say new automation. And here, you know, there's like, you know, weekly sprint repeat. Here we want to say, okay, whenever a page, whenever the status is set to done, and here the second part will be, and the type is weekly sprint meeting, right? Only this one. Then we want it to do something, and what we want it to do is we want it to add a page to our task database. And now you get this dropdown now that you have templates in here, and you can say, please add it as weekly sprint meeting, which means it will automatically pre-fill all the properties from that, the correct name, for example. And all we need to do is set, in this case, the due date. And again, same idea, right? We will pick in this case, let's say date triggered dot date add, and we want to add the from the page that triggered it, the repeat every, and that in days. Same idea as with the rest, but now instead of, you know, just copying over the values from our old task, we apply a task template every single time. But of course, all the other elements that you had before, right, you can use as well. That all stays the same. And now, as promised, here's a version of recurring tasks that you can implement without any database automations. It is a little bit less flexible than these other methods and a little bit less powerful, but it's still good to know about it because there are situations where you want to have this in your toolkit. So in order to do like a general recurring element in Notion, what you can do is if you created a template, you can go on the 3 dots here and you can say, please repeat. And you can say, okay, what are the frequencies? And you see we're a lot more limited here, right? We can't do the other elements, but we can say, please repeat this, you know, monthly, every 1 month, or let's say we want to repeat it weekly. We want to repeat it always Mondays, Wednesdays, and Fridays. We can set a time. And what will happen now is every day, and whenever this like is true, so on every Monday, Wednesday, and Friday, it will create a new instance of this template. And whatever properties you know, you have set in there, they will apply. Now, one very important thing, if you do this, use this method, then you need to set the due date dynamically. Otherwise, it will be empty, right? And then you have a weekly sprint meeting without a date. So you want to go in here and make sure that you say it to today date when duplicated. So this means whenever this now triggers, it will automatically fill in the right date. Less customizability than with the other method and no dynamic options, right? This will create one instance regardless of whether you finish the previous one. But so in the right situation, this is also quite a useful method. So much for recurring tasks in Notion. This is just one of many amazing new use cases that have been unlocked by the update for Notion database automations. For example, did you know that it's finally possible to set all your tasks to done when you set the project to done, or to start a project when you start the first task? To learn more about this and many other cool tricks, check out this video next. Just click here and I will see you in a second.